Hello everybody, welcome to Biology Lecture 2. This is feedback mechanisms and homeostasis. Again, just to recap, make sure that before we start our lecture, you should have your outline printed out so that we could actually go line by line about our today's lecture. Alright, but before we get started, we actually stopped a little bit before. So we have to go back to our last lecture outline. If you don't have that now, please go get it. You can pause this video at any time. And so let's get to it, shall we? All right. So going back to lecture 1, we actually stopped at cladograms. We stopped at this area right here. Let's go and quickly go through it. So what is a cladogram? Cladogram is a way to show a relationship between species using some sort of branches or branching diagram. Okay, so there are actually two types of characteristics used to create a cladogram. First is what we call morphological, which means similar physical form or structures in an organism. For example, morphologically, how are penguins and eagles related? Now, you know, they're two different species. One is more aquatic and the other is more not aquatic, not terrestrial. Whereas penguins don't fly; they use their wings for pretty much swimming, whereas eagles use it to fly. So morphologically, how they're similar. Obviously, you could say that they have beaks, they have wings, and so on and so forth. All right, B, molecular. Molecular is similar DNA, RNA, or proteins, or anything molecular that are similar within an organism. Usually DNA is number 1, and if DNA is unavailable, RNA and proteins are the next two that are used to actually classify organisms based on their relationship. Let's take a look at a typical cladogram. You'll see that you have time on the left side. Usually, always there's time on the left side, and so you have a common ancestor that starts out over here, and then somewhere along the line they broke up, speciated, and sometime a long time ago. So remember, this much time ago, they split. And if you were to say, obviously, this would say something like present, if that's true. So this will be the present day, like where you are now, and this will be whatever, how many years ago. And so they split, and then over time you have a split here also as well, and then somewhere along this time, B and C they split along over here. Then you have two species, and this keeps going, and then you have a split, and then you have a split again. Now the question here is, which one of these species are more closely related? Well, the answer to that is going to be B and C, E and D. Why? The reason why is because they actually split off quite recently, which means that not a lot of changes may have happened. So the more recent the organism split, the less time has gone by, so therefore you have less differences. Whereas A and F split off somewhere around this line right here. So a long time has passed, most likely many changes have occurred as they're again evolving to fit their environment, and changes will occur over time. Remember, that's what evolution is: changes that occur in an organism over time. Now, if I were to ask you, what happens if there was a split over here, and I mark the line, and I put down G right here? Notice that this G is not along with these guys in the present. Well, this species right here would have gone extinct. Why? Because for obvious reasons, it never made it to the present. And most likely, why did G go extinct? Extinction usually occurs is because when organisms face a situation where they're not able to adapt to that particular environment, so they go extinct. Okay, so just many types of reasons that could happen. A type of predator would have moved into their area where they have no natural defenses against it, and they usually get out hunted. They're hunted down and they're all killed off. Or the organism moved into the area where they start to now compete for resources, and then but the other organism is just slightly better at obtaining resources than they are, and they go extinct. There are many reasons for extinction, but the main reason for extinction is that organisms are unable to adapt to the new change in their environment. All right, so on the bottom right here is an example of a cladogram. This will have actual normal organisms in here, and this is actually a real cladogram. I forgot to put time over here. It doesn't really matter. So you get an idea. All right, so you can see the like, you know, the theropods and birds are actually more closely related. Okay, guys, so let's move on to today's lesson, and this is going to be on feedback mechanisms. So what is a feedback? Oh, so what is, and homeostasis. So what is homeostasis? Homeostasis is pretty much your relatively stable internal environment, despite changes around an organism. For example, your body temperature remains at 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit or 36.2 degrees Celsius, no matter what happens to the outside. The outside could be 70 degrees, or the outside could be 100 degrees, but your temperature will always remain the same. The reason why your temperature remains the same is because you have certain mechanisms in your body that ensures that they remain that particular level. So what are these structures in your body that make sure that all your internal environment remains constant no matter changes on the outside? Well, these are your body systems or organ systems. We've been talking about organ systems before. Most of you guys must have learned organ systems in life science. So here they are again. I put down over here so that you guys could actually review them. If you don't know them already, please just review each one and their functions and purposes. Okay, so there's quite a few. All right, let's move on to number 2, feedback mechanisms. What is a feedback mechanism? Feedback mechanism is the way homeostasis is maintained in the body. Homeostasis is maintained by a diversity of feedback mechanisms. A feedback mechanism is exactly what it is. Feedback means it's a loop, all right, wherein a system responds to a change in the human body away from its normal state caused by outside influences. Say, for example, something occurs that makes your body's level go one way. Well, feedback mechanism will respond to that. And there's 2 kinds of feedback mechanism. It's a positive feedback, where if there's a change to go in one direction, your body will cause that change to keep on going that same direction. Whereas when you have a negative feedback, if there's a change in your body that goes one way, your body will certain things in your body will occur to cause that change to go back to its original starting point. Now you would see that negative feedback probably should be the most common, and positive feedback is, why would we even need that? That's crazy. Well, let's take a look. Next page over. Let's take a look at negative feedback. Negative, for most, you guessed right, most types of feedback mechanisms in the body maintain homeostasis in this particular type of manner. So in a negative feedback, the final step inhibits the first step. For example, let's take a look at the blood sugar level. I like using this, but sometimes it's also good to look at it a different way, because who knows how the Regents is going to pose the question to you. So imagine a feedback mechanism like a thermostat. All right, so say, for example, in a thermostat, you set your house temperature to, say, for example, let's take a look at this line. This line right here is what we call the normal line. If this was the house, let's say it's 72 degrees Fahrenheit is your normal line. All right. Now, say, for example, the temperature gets increases. What ends up happening is that when the temperature increases, there's an increase in temperature. What ends up happening is that your thermostat will detect that, and it will actually turn your AC on. AC turns on. And then when the AC turns on, what happens is that now the temperature goes back down to normal, and then the AC will shut off. And then now what ends up happening is you go back to normal. Now, what happens if the temperature decreases? Well, if the temperature decreases, your thermostat will detect that, and it will actually turn on the heat. Heat turns on. If the heat turns on, then it will cause the temperature to rise back up to normal. And so now, this is what we call a negative feedback. If it goes one way, something occurs, whatever it is, to make it go back down to the opposite way. Or when it goes down, something occurs to make it go back the opposite way until you hit what normal is. And this normal right here would be something like your homeostasis for your body, for example. This is obviously not your body. It's air conditioning and heat. Now, because of this going up or going down, normal actually is not a straight line. It's actually more of something that looks like this. It goes like that. It's like a tightrope walker. What happens is that it's going to, if say for example you look at an overhead for a tightrope walker, if he starts leaning to the left, what happens? He starts to lean to the right to kind of compensate. But then when he leans to the right, he starts going over too much to the right, so to compensate, he leans to his left. And he keeps on doing that up until he gets to the point. But really, he's going back and forth. He's not going straight. He's going back and forth. Well, the same thing with negative feedback. We call this back and forth or up and down a dynamic equilibrium. The word equilibrium means balance. Dynamic is ever-changing. So it's weird, right? Ever-changing balance. So it's always going up and down, but really it's where we're maintaining the same norm. Equilibrium means balance. Okay? So remember that word. Sometimes you might hear that word dynamic equilibrium. Really is the way your homeostasis works. Goes up and down. Negative feedback works up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. Or left, right, left, right, left, right. But still maintaining a norm. Okay. So let's take a look at how that is for a regular human body. Well, the most classic example that your regents will give you is the negative feedback regarding blood sugar production. So, example, maintenance of human blood sugar. So this right here is homeostasis. This is your normal blood glucose level. You can see here that in this case it's 90 milligrams for every 100 milliliters of blood. So 90 milligrams of glucose for every 100 milliliters of blood. What happens if you eat a cupcake, and have a cupcake over here? What happens? Your blood sugar will rise. It will actually then cause your pancreas to release insulin, and then the insulin will then causes two things. It will actually start making your cells in your body take up glucose. It will also cause your liver to take up glucose as well and store it as glycogen. And then, when this happens, the cells take up glucose, and your liver is pulling up glucose from your blood to store as glycogen. What happens to your blood sugar level goes back to normal, and then you're good to go. But what happens if you say you are roughly around 11 o'clock, or nearing 12, and you start to get hungry because you maybe missed breakfast, and your blood glucose starts to fall? Well, the pancreas will actually detect that. And your pancreas will then release glucagon, and the glucagon will break down break down glycogen and release glucose into the bloodstream. And then by the liver releasing glucose back into the bloodstream, it will actually cause the blood glucose level back to rise. Okay, so you can see here that this is a feedback mechanism. And let's move on to number 4, positive feedback. And so now remember, I told you before, the positive feedback seems counterintuitive to fixing something that's broken in your say homeostasis that's off, but sometimes it's actually important. So there are actually very few positive feedbacks in the human body. I think one of them is childbirth. The other one is actually something that most of you guys will probably be more familiar with because you guys are boys and you run around like maniacs. Is when you have a blood vessel that breaks, something you cut your skin and blood starts spewing out. Well, positive feedback is the opposite of negative feedback. It encourages the physiological process or amplifies the action of the system, which means that if it goes something occurs that goes one way, it will cause it to go that same direction. Positive feedback is a cyclical process that continues to amplify your body's response. Let's take a look at an example of blood clotting. Now over here, your blood vessel breaks. Maybe somebody scratches you because they don't cut their fingernails while playing basketball. Or maybe you just fall down from your bicycle and you break a blood vessel and blood starts leaking out. Now, for obvious reasons, this can't happen. Something's got to occur. So when the blood starts to leak out, it creates a cycle continues where clotting starts to occur. Then clotting will actually start to adhere to the broken area. And when that starts to occur, it will cause even more clotting to occur. So it will clot, clot, clot. So you're going one direction and then furthermore in the same direction. Okay, you're not going opposite. All right, you're going more. So blood clotting is an example of. Another example is swelling. If you're to damage your joints or ligaments, swelling will occur, and when that occurs, it will cause your body to swell even more. So it's a positive feedback going one direction. All right, disease. What happens if your body is unable to maintain homeostasis? Well, disease will happen. Let's take a look at our two examples: diabetes and what is diabetes? Diabetes is a disease where the body is unable to maintain blood sugar. If your body is unable to do this, to maintain the normal level, we call that diabetes. That's an example of a disease that results from a malfunction in homeostasis or disruption in homeostasis. The next one is hemophilia. What happens if your body is unable to form blood clots? If, for example, this doesn't work, then that would cause a disease. In this case, hemophilia, where a small cut will cause just you to not clot, and which means you just bleed. All right, so number 6, causes of diseases. Now there's three causes of diseases here. Let's talk about the first one. The first one is caused by pathogen or an infectious agent. It could be infectious agent, a biological agent that causes disease or illness to its host. So let's take a look at some examples of pathogens. And again, with this current topic, viruses. Viruses, believe it or not, are not alive. They're not living. They're non-living particles. They infect cells. But what makes virus so insidious is that when they infect the cell, they cause the cell to produce more viruses. So, for example, if you have you have a normal cell, like so here's a normal cell. What happens if a virus infects it? Here's your virus. What happens is that it injects the genetic material into the cell, and if this was the nucleus and this is the DNA of the cell, what happens is that this genetic material incorporates itself to DNA, RNA, incorporates into the DNA of the host cell, and then this DNA, this right here, contains instructions to shut the whole thing down and only starts to produce viral parts. So what ends up happening is that the cell, instead of producing the normal proteins it produces, it starts to produce more viruses in the cell. So here's more viruses. It starts making virus parts and assembles them into viruses. Eventually, the cell will actually fill up with viruses, and then it will rupture. When it ruptures, then all the viruses are then released into the outside, where they could infect more cells, and the whole cycle starts again, and it just keeps doing that over and over again. And so it just starts to destroy your cells as they multiply. So they're actually using the body's cell's machinery to make more of itself. Okay, so those are viruses. Now, what are some viruses that you may have heard of? Well, the common cold. It's a type of virus. Right, it's called the rhinovirus. And obviously, the one that we're more familiar with, the influenza virus, the flu virus. It's this new virus is going on now. That's why we're all sitting here and I'm talking to you through this. Well, how are they treated? They're usually treated with antiviral medications or vaccines. Later on, we're going to talk about what vaccines are. Bacterium. These are living organisms, bacteria. When they infect by releasing toxins that interfere with homeostasis, or they literally just eat you. They metabolize your tissues for food. An example of that is Streptococcus or strep throat. It infects your throat, and they actually start to metabolize the lining of your throat, and that's why you get that you can start cough blood. Or botulism, they release toxins, or what we call botulinum toxin or Botox, and Botox actually is a type of toxin that interferes with nerve signals. It causes paralysis. Fungus could invade and disrupt healthy tissue or release toxins that cause inflammation. For example, athlete's foot or ringworm. Athlete's foot is like when you get that itchy, burning red sensation in your foot. That's athlete's foot. You have a fungal infection. They're usually treated with antifungal medication and creams. Parasites. Again, these are organisms that would live on or in the host. It gets its food at the expense of the host, and if you're the host, tapeworm and leeches would be something like the parasite. They're usually treated with antiparasitic medication, or just pretty much just pull it out if it's a leech. B, cancer. We talked about cancers before. That's abnormal mitotic cell division caused by mutations. And C, genetic disorders. Again, we spoke about that. This is when you have a mutation that causes a non-functional protein. Example would be diabetes. Normally the insulin protein works. Well, for some reason the insulin protein or hormone doesn't work, and as a result, you can't maintain your blood sugar level. All right, guys, down here also will be your lecture assignment 2. That'll be due Thursday, and these are it. Do me a favor again, everybody. Please do not send me via messaging. Please upload it directly to Jupyter. All right, bye.